Welcome back, folks. Hope you're enjoying coverage of this event so far. My name is Max Kahn, and today I'm joined by TeamNRG member Eric Hawkins. Eric, how are you doing today?
How you doing?
Great. So we've got a couple questions so that the team can know the newest member of TeamNRG, and let's just get started. So the first
Okay.
question is, how long have you been playing Magic, and who taught you how to play?
I've been playing Magic for a very long time. Got into it around Arabian Nights, but haven't haven't played seriously or didn't start playing seriously until about Mirrodin. That's when I got into like competitive Magic, you could say. But I learned to play from a couple of guys at school. They just had like a little group. I sat down, game looked awesome, and after that, I was just like hooked.
Bunch of
So.
unsleeved cards on pavement.
Pretty much play the biggest green thing that you can play. There's like sweet combos like Force of Nature and Circle Protection Green. That was like our thing.
Absolutely.
So,
All right, so what is your favorite Magic-related story? Whether you've had it in an event or had it otherwise, what's your best experience playing Magic?
uh, it was actually in I guess you would call it a cube draft. My buddy had a promo cube built,
Okay.
and I was playing combo as I do in a lot of different formats, and you could get like a really sweet 10 rolls deck, and I was playing against my buddy Jason Scalesbo, and he drafted a cheaty face, which I immediately spotted in turn one of the game, and he like set it off to the side. Well, we fast forward a few turns, and I'm facing basically lethal on board, but I can combo him out next turn if I can make a land drop, and so I cast a Facts or Fiction during his attack step, and during his attack step, like my Factor Fiction's great. It's almost too good. It hits like Yogg's Will and a bunch of other cards, and
Hmm.
he goes into the tank. And while he's in the tank, I grab the cheaty face and slide it underneath the Factor Fiction, and
Provide a
get to
blocker.
go. Or then he like, here's your piles, and I'm like, great, I'll take this pile with the Yogg's Will, and move the Factor Fiction. He's like, wait, that's my cheaty face, and my buddy was like, no, that works. He's cheaty face. So got to make my block, and then ended up killing him the next turn with the combo.
Awesome. All right, so you just talked about how you love playing combo decks, and on the SCG Tour, you've been known to be an innovator. So one of the questions that came up was, what's it like having a deck idea that goes through development? You get a deck list, and then you see it having tournament success. What's that like?
It's pretty awesome. Makes you feel pretty smart, I guess, is the funny thing. But I mean, it's it's always great to see your work pay off.
Hmm.
You're sitting here, throwing a bunch of cards that, don't look like they're good cards. They're not like Siege Rhinos or, like cards like that where they're just like you could just tell that they're powerful by themselves. Like I like to like build like a different or decks with like a bunch of synergies in them, and so like usually end up playing with like subpar cards, and it's really cool when everything works out and then you do well.
Cool. So one of the decks that you've been known very lately for playing with this strategy is the four-color rally deck in Standard. And you and other Team Energy member Matthew Tickle have been putting a lot of time and effort into tuning this deck. And it's obviously paid off. You've been doing great on the SCG Open Series with it. And team captain Joe Lissette actually asked me on Twitter what you think about the four-color rally deck, whether it's the mirror match is a grind or a race, and just general thoughts about the four-color rally deck currently.
I think the four-color rally deck is great. It's in a little weird spot right now because it has like a giant target on its head. So sometimes, like even like last week, I played against a guy that had Anafenza and the new Kalitas and Dispel and Hollowed Moonlight.
Okay.
Lost that match. It was a lot of hate to get through. But I think it's gonna ebb and flow on how much hate people are boarding in, whether or not the deck has a lot of success or not. As far as the mirror, um, there's like two ways the mirror can play out. All of the bounce creatures come into play on one side and completely annihilate the other person.
Sure.
Um, and then usually that happens with like cards like Collected Company, which is like the most important card in the deck and also in the mirror. But there's also these other games where that doesn't happen, and then you just get into this giant grind where you're trying to chip shot and damage here and there, and then eventually try to win with a rally and a bunch of drains with the Zulapar Cutthroats.
Interesting. So one of the things that you always talk about is how important it is to play technically, because with combo decks like FourColor Rally specifically, and other decks in general, you think it's pretty important to play at the top of your game and always make the correct decisions. So what do you think is one piece of advice that you praise, you think that all Magic players need to hear?
I think one of the biggest things when you're playing Magic is if you want to play technically well, is always make sure that you have a reason for doing something. Um, don't just play a spell because, well, it seems good here. I have 4 mana and I have a 4 mana spell. Make sure that you know why you're doing it. Make sure even when you're like tapping your lands, you know why you're tapping that land. Is there anything that you can represent by tapping slightly differently? And there's just like, as long as you have a reason for what you're doing, whether it's right or wrong or not, as long as you know what your game plan is by doing this, I think a lot of people will go a lot further. I notice a lot of people during their games when I'm just like watching them, they have a tendency to just cast a spell, tap mana for it, and then they're all of a sudden they're like, oh man, I should have left this land open, or if I wouldn't have cast that into this, into what I thought was like an Ulamog or another sweeper or something like that, or not or an Ugin or something like that. Um, they just like realize it after they've done it, and they just didn't because they just didn't think about it beforehand. So just slow down a little bit, take yourself away from the game a little bit, and make sure you have reasons for doing whatever you're doing.
So another question we've got for you is actually one of my favorite questions. I think we get a lot of interesting answers from a lot of different people about what they think. But the question is, what are some misconceptions you think that non-Magic players have about the game, and how would you fix those misconceptions?
Uh, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that we're holed up in your mom's basement and like don't come out of while there's still sunlight. I think one of the biggest ways that you can get out of that is I mean just through like social media. I personally I play well I haven't this year but or this season but I personally play like basketball in a basketball league. And when I was growing up, I was playing like on the high school football team and like high school hockey and stuff like that. And so like just showing that side of yourself on social media as well with your Magic playing, even if like it's not like athletics, if you're just like, hey, went outside today, it was like great day and all this stuff, and people will realize, hey, maybe it's not just a bunch of for the better words I guess
Yeah,
like nerds or geeks hanging out in the basement like um just like tied to their computers all day. So
interesting. So our last question actually comes from TeamNRG captain Joe Lissette. When I posted on Twitter earlier about if anybody had questions for you, Joe Lissette was the first to
Mhm.
respond, and his question was actually a pretty heartfelt one. You were the first person to be knocked out of the Players' Championship last year. Uh,
Yeah.
how did that feel, and was there a consideration of giving up or not trying to go for it last year, and what's your focus this year?
There was like really no giving up like thoughts. I like obviously was disappointed. I like tried to make it my goal for the Players Championship, but then when I sat back and looked at it, it was like there was a bunch of like great accomplishments that I had last year, and it was the first year that I really sat down and was like, I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna make myself good at Magic. And I mean, I was basically 10 points away. So this year, I'm going back at it. A little slow start to this year, but you know, just got to figure out that day two thing and
Yep.
perhaps get some points up on that leaderboard. So yeah, I'll be here all year for sure.
All right. Well, it's good to know that you're back on the SCG Tour this year, hoping to make another run at the Players' Championship. Folks, that's all we've got here from Eric Hawkins. Thanks so much, Eric, for spending the time with us, and please enjoy the coverage of the rest of this event.